It's Friday again. Let's start with total public debt outstanding in the United States of America. It's an economic pick data chart going back to 1993. And this is the number that's about 14 trillion now, you know, the debt ceiling sort of talk, that one. From 93 to 99, it rose at an annual rate of 3.2%. From 00 to 07, it rose at 7.3%. The last 3 years, 08, 09, 010, it's risen at 16.5%. Doo-doot, doo-doot, doo-doot. Exponential growth, can it continue at 16.5% annualized growth? Question mark. My Budget 360. The gambling economy. Nevada GDP contracted 6.4% during the crisis. A state where 1 out of 4 people is unemployed or underemployed. States trying to balance budgets with gambling and casinos. Yes, he of good charts and long titles. The first chart he gives us is unemployment rate in Nevada. Wobbles along at around 5% until the recession and then woof up. Well through 13%, through 14%. He writes, Nevada has a headline unemployment rate of 14.3%, which puts the unemployment and underemployment rate at about 25%. It is hard to believe that we are dealing with states that have underemployment rates of 25%, all the while talking about a healthy economy. The stock market has recovered incredibly since the lows of 2009, yet this has not translated to financial growth for average Americans. And he then gives us a chart for state revenue from legalized gambling. Those are all states together getting revenue in from legalized gambling. 1998 it was 15 trillion. It reached a peak nearly 25, sorry, did I say trillion? Billion. And it really has come down a lot since the recession, which is quite surprising because gambling often goes up in times of crisis. Los Angeles Times, governor to disconnect 48,000 cell phones in the hands of state workers. Alarmed at discovering the state pays for 96,000 cell phones, Governor Jerry Brown issued an executive order Tuesday seeking to cut in half the number of devices being billed to taxpayers, requiring 48,000 cell phones be turned off by June the 1st, and that will save $20 million a year. Would you have said cut it in half? I wouldn't. That's a stupid way of going about things. So good luck, California. Wall Street Journal, Illinois House passes big income tax increases. That's the way to do it. Among the increases in the bill, the individual income tax rate would jump to 5% from 3%. The corporation tax would also rise to 7% from 4.8%. They'll rake in the money. Perhaps. So that's the way you do it. Texas, if you're short of money, just put the taxes up and watch the funds flood in. Maybe. Business Insider Money Game, Richard Koo on why Obama's business tax breaks will be a flop. Richard Koo, he of Balance Sheet Recessions, works for Nomura. Very nice chap. I think he's had America in mind so much when he has Japan in his mind on this side and can see what's happening, and he can see that this is going to be a failure. You get a tax break for a year, but as Bernanke said, the economy might not come back for 5 years, so you get a tax break for 1 year and you're stuck with the new plant that you got tax breaks on for 4 years, and it might not be working enough to pay the loans back. Koo says it's just not ernugh. Inside a Money Game again, meet the central banker whose reckless money printing is causing commodity spikes and riots worldwide. Bernanke, yeah? No, it's the Chinese, chappie. And we've got a chart of M2 money supply growth in China on the website up to April 2010, wobbling along flat, and then it's 45 degrees bottom left, top right. Fed collateral terms from the Financial Times. I'll read this all to you because it's quite a concise little 3 paragraphs. The Swiss National Bank no longer accepts Portuguese sovereign bonds as collateral. The situation at the Fed is that it will accept euro sovereign credit if it is investment grade, that's triple B or better, and they accept it as long as it takes an 8% haircut. That's for securities with a duration of less than 5 years, and it will put a bigger haircut on anything that's longer than 5 years. In theory, it follows that the Fed still accepts Portugal and Ireland, but not Greece. It's very interesting how these central banks go on about things. Some things they seem very tight and organised on, and others they seem to be la-la and throwing money all over the place. New York Times, Can Europe Be Saved? And a very, very long article by Paul Krugman, but it is extremely well done. It's a well-written article, and worth reading if you really don't know about the euro and want to. It's right from its opening ideas to the way it was put in place, how it's gone wrong, and how it could be repaired. A couple of lines I've dragged from it. Back in the 90s, people who were present told me that staff members at the European Commission were initially instructed to prepare reports on the costs and benefits of the single currency. This is in the 90s, getting ready for the euro. But after their superiors got a look at some of the preliminary work, those instructions were altered. They were then told to prepare reports just on the benefits. And this is one of the big takes from all this, that economists told the politicians that there were huge problems and there's a chance it just plain would not work. But the politicians had their ideas, their vision, and pushed on ahead regardless. Guardian Co UK, EU leaders want swift deal on bigger Eurozone bailout fund. And the first two paragraphs of this gives us an idea, a flavour of why the Eurozone and the euro currency thing is not working. EU leaders today called for more effective action to defend the euro by increasing the hundreds of billions in the Eurozone's bailout fund and extending the fund's scope to include bond buying and short-term credit for countries in distress. Now, that was EU leaders called today for that. Second paragraph, the French and German governments dismissed the calls in Brussels as unnecessary, but José Manuel Barroso, President of the European Commission, appeared to be picking a fight with Berlin and Paris by insisting on agreement to boost the bailout fund within 3 weeks. And there you have it. You have Europe arguing, trying to demand things and fighting with Berlin government and the French government. How is it to work out when nobody knows who's in charge? The Telegraph, the UK is not ready for the demise of finance. It's a tricky little article, but I'll give you this from it. It gives you a flavour. It would certainly be better for the overall health of the nation if it wasn't so dependent on finance. But, unfortunate though it might seem, the city, the term is loosely used here to include all finance, accounts for about 10% of UK economic output. And once the myriad of business services, IT and other support staff that ride on finance's back are accounted for, the city is responsible for rather more than 20% of tax revenues. The economy would be in a state of ruin without it. It's all very sad. Finish with Reuters, and Brent oil hits 27-month high. $100 is in view. The price of Brent crude is roughly $98.50. Global oil demand this year is forecast to reach a record 88.6 million barrels per day, following much faster demand growth last year than most analysts expected. First line of that, global oil demand this year is forecast to reach a record 88.6 million barrels a day. Why do they keep going on about oil demand, global oil demand, or local oil demand? It's almost irrelevant what the oil demand is. I've seen charts that project out into the future up to 2030 and beyond, oil demand going up and up and up like this. And on the same chart, they've got projected oil production going down like this. And it makes what the oil demand is irrelevant, doesn't it? I can't understand it. Anyway, that's something to think about at the weekend if you've got nothing better to do. Otherwise, enjoy. Bye.